There are a few constants in life: gravity, death, the law of conservation of mass, and me making yearly Call of Duty beta impressions. A little bit of context for the uninitiated. I've been playing Call of Duty since 2, and 4, World at War, and Modern Warfare 2 are all personal classics. While I did play almost every game that came after, I steadily lost interest over time, and I would say that beginning with the 8th gen consoles, it entered an indisputable dark age. First, we got the highly contentious trilogy of enhanced mobility sci-fi games that attempted to use noise and gimmicks to distract from the fact that, at their core, they were no different from what had come before. World War II and Black Ops 4 were half-hearted olive branches to the fans that clamored for a return to boots-on-the-ground combat. Then Modern Warfare 2019 rolled along and, if you ask me, managed to address every major issue plaguing the franchise. It finally brought a reworked, modern engine with tangibly different gameplay feel, did away with all the gimmicks, and even managed to pack in a pretty great campaign as well. It's a fantastic game that I think will be looked back upon as being just as significant for the series as 4 was. After giving us this revitalized, next-generation take on Call of Duty, Activision followed it up with Black Ops Cold War, a game that felt like taking multiple steps backward due to its use of Black Ops 3 and 4's dated tech. From a consumer perspective, it's a boring, forgettable game that failed to make an impact. But behind the scenes, chaos was unfolding. Since 2014, COD games have had a 3-year, 3-developer cycle: Infinity Ward, Treyarch, and Sledgehammer. According to that cadence, Cold War should have been Sledgehammer's game, and apparently it was going to be, but after some alleged infighting with co-developer Raven, Activision intervened, swapping them out for Treyarch and shifting them to COD 2021. Last-minute shakeups such as these are rarely a recipe for a good product, especially when we're talking about the biggest yearly franchise in the industry. There is no doubt that Cold War suffered as a result of it, and it's likely that Sledgehammer wasted time on it as well, meaning that Vanguard also didn't get the full development cycle they expected. Frankly, it's the last thing Sledgehammer needed. Vanguard is only their 3rd game, and the first 2 aren't exactly greatest hits. Advanced Warfare ushered in the enhanced mobility era, and is also the press F to pay respects game, while World War II is, well, does anyone remember that game? As the obvious weak link in the 3-developer chain, they still need to prove themselves to the player base, and after that Cold War drama, they're likely in hot water with Activision as well. Though I suppose Activision have more pressing issues to deal with. However, going into this game, they had one vital asset that I thought could give them a chance against those impossible odds: the new engine. I boldly claimed last year that MW 2019's tech and gameplay framework was so good that even a half-assed reskin of it would potentially be a better game than the dismal Cold War. After enduring hours of this beta, I think I might have spoken too soon.
Recon mission ready! Find the boss! Double kill! Bloodthirsty! Triple kill! Fury kill!
The most notable attribute of this game is that it's using the same tech as MW 2019, with many calling it a cheap reskin. I don't think that paints the full picture, because that's giving it way too much credit. While the technical underpinnings might be identical and in many places extremely apparent to the player, there's just something wrong with the way shooting handles in this game, and I think it comes down to tuning and poor design choices. FPS games are a balancing act. Sound design, models, animation, statistical damage output, and so much more must all be properly dialed in to make a game that's satisfying to play. Unfortunately, Sledgehammer were not able to pull it off. First off, the sound design is horrible. The mix is bad. Some of it is unintentional, with sounds occasionally not happening when they should, but it's just hard to hear in general. It sounded like my speakers were broken. The guns sound thin and rattly, yet every other sound is smothered in bass like a Michael Bay film. Shooting and getting kills does not feel very good. There's a lack of impact and feedback, and I think it's primarily a result of that poor sound design.
We have the lead, keep it up! Double kill! Triple kill! Recon mission ready!
Another seemingly ancillary issue that has a direct effect on core gameplay is the insane amount of visual noise this game has. Visibility sucks. Players are difficult to identify, you can never see more than 10 feet ahead of you, and it's all amplified exponentially during ADS shooting. There's a ton of visual recoil, muzzle flash, and bullets turn into firecrackers upon impact. You just can't see shit in this game when aiming. In terms of actual weapon balancing, the time to kill is more in line with MW than Cold War, but the weapons are slightly too weak and absolutely too slow given how frantically the matches play out. It's overall a weird experience, because things like the view models and movement are 100% MW, and that comes through while playing. But all those bad choices made with the more minor details really add up and make this infinitely worse to play.
Charlie is overrun!
MW introduced a bevy of gameplay flourishes like tactical sprint, mounting, and ADS reloads. And all of that makes a return here, albeit with some minor embellishments, if you can even call them that. When mounted, you can now slide around and blind fire, the latter of which is the weirdest and most useless feature I can recall ever being in a COD game. The only truly new feature is destructibles. Opaque glass can be shattered, doors can be damaged, and you can run through wooden barricades like you're the Hulk. It's a pretty meaningless addition to begin with, but once they're gone, and that tends to happen within the first minute or two of a match. The gameplay systems are mostly untouched as well. The field upgrades are a combination of what we've seen in the past two games. Dead silence, field mic, and an ammo box that uses the same animation as MW, as well as Warzone-style armor plates and a miniature tank drone. The kill streaks are, somehow, even more dull than last year. Having dogs as the top kill streak is a nice nod to World at War, but the player-controlled options can be almost comically ineffective. The glide bomb is this game's version of a Predator missile, and it just doesn't want to cooperate. There are 3 handheld streaks: the Death Machine, the War Machine, and the Flame Knot. The Death Machine has an interesting gimmick. It's not lost upon death and can be used until it's out of ammo. It's a good thing it does that, because there's no way it could possibly justify being a streak otherwise. It can be outgunned by an SMG. The Flame Knot predictably turns you into a guy with a flamethrower, and the range is extremely limited, while the War Machine is the same semi-auto grenade launcher we've seen in the past few Black Ops games. There's nothing of note going on in regards to perks or loadouts, so I'll just skip right to the Gunsmith. The Gunsmith has quickly become a series staple, but for a game as basic and dejected as this one tends to be with its design, you'd think they'd have gone for a more back-to-basics approach here, but that's not the case. It's almost as if they ignored everything else just so they would have the time to go nuts with the Gunsmith, because it's unhinged levels of crazy. There are now 10 slots available. You're allowed to fill all of them by default, and if you use Overkill for a second primary, that one can have 10 as well. That's just way too far, and maybe it's an oversight, because it's totally at odds with how sleepy the rest of this game's systems are. Map design is where things really fall apart for Vanguard. The maps seem to come in 2 varieties: slightly too big with long sightlines for snipers to abuse, and labyrinthian hellholes that feel like playing in some billionaire's hedge maze. It turns out that there's a reason for this. Not a good reason, mind you, but a reason. The headline addition that Sledgehammer are advertising for this game is this new feature called combat pacing, and it's something you'll have to interact with to even get into a match. They do a terrible job of explaining it in-game, but what it mostly boils down to is player count. Tactical is always traditional 6v6, Assault ranges from 10v10 to 14v14, and Blitz cranks things up to a maximum of 24v24. Modern Warfare also had support for high player counts, and included maps that were specifically designed for it. Sledgehammer dismissed that last detail, and decided that every map can be anything it wants. All 4 of the maps included in the beta were playable with any of the 3 combat paces. These maps are bad enough to begin with. 3 of the 4 feature obvious 3-lane design, and those lanes get clogged up like a smoker's arteries, with almost no space left to maneuver around in, and the 4th map is like the absence of design. Now you're giving these already struggling maps the added stress of having to handle, in some cases, dramatically different player counts. These maps just buckle under that pressure and make this game incredibly frustrating to play. Let's use Red Star, the prerequisite snowy Russian map, as an example. This map supports both 6v6 and 24v24 with no adjustments to the playspace. It's the same map either way. That is fucking ridiculous. It is not possible to design a map that can do both of those things competently, but you can certainly have it do both poorly. 6v6 should never happen on this map. It's way too big for it. But 24v24 doesn't work either. One team inevitably gets stuck in their spawn, snipers sit way back taking pot shots with impunity, and everyone else is just running to their death. I played hours of this game and didn't see a single one of these big team, big map games play out differently. No amount of twitch reflexes or clever movement can get you out of these clusterfucks. Having a high player count on the more cramped maps can be a fun gimmick, but it's just as messy. The spawns do not work. People will spawn directly behind you, and you will spawn directly behind them. There's just no getting around the fact that this implementation of a variable player count system is not a good idea, and it has clearly informed this very odd map design with maps that are poorly balanced because they're balanced around nothing. I've managed to go this long without addressing that this is a World War II game, and that's because being set in World War II is perhaps the most trivial and fumbled aspect of Vanguard. Things like faux red dot sights are par for the course in modern World War II games, but this game does an even worse job of convincing me of the setting than Battlefield 5. I completely understand that some concessions have to be made to make a fun game. But when you look at the abominations coming out of the gunsmith, the miniature tank drone, and some of those kill streaks, it's like they didn't want to make a World War II game, and the setting is a hindrance rather than an asset. They're trying to make things that are analogous to MW, but not everything that works for that game will work in a World War II game. Outside of the guns, in their unmolested forms, of course, there is nothing here to ground you in the World War II setting. I'm not saying that I need swastikas and rising suns shoved in my face every 5 seconds, but at what point are you deviating so far from your setting that it's not even that setting anymore? This erosion has got to the point where it's even affecting gameplay. There are no factions in multiplayer, meaning that you could theoretically have Japanese, German, and English soldiers all fighting alongside each other. This has the knock-on effect of making it impossible to tell who is friend or foe by character model alone, so you're forced to rely on the red name tags, which can be both not proactive enough and too aggressive, giving away your position when they probably shouldn't. Most people don't care about historical accuracy in their games, but when these choices start having a negative impact on gameplay, something has clearly gone wrong. I'm not going to lie, I had a bad time with this game. While I've disliked some of the previous COD betas, this is by far the most outright negative experience I've ever had with one. Even if I didn't end up liking them, it was at least a little fun at times to go on a tear, but I honestly had no fun playing this. Not even for a second. It's a poorly designed, aimless game, and beyond that, it's poorly made as well. I was experiencing stutters, glitchy textures, and many of the maps are extremely uneven in their performance. I played on a 3090 at 4K with pared back settings, and I still saw the FPS plummet when I went to the indoor areas on maps like Hotel Royal. I had one match where the UI was present, but the game itself wasn't rendering. I had the game lock up and hard crash 5 times. And the cherry on top? I ran into players that already had cheats. In the beta. Presumably those are just MW or Warzone cheats that they're testing out during the free beta with no repercussions, but Jesus Christ, really? This is the worst technical state that a COD beta has been in by a Verdansk mile. I try to be more tactful with my words on YouTube, because I don't like the kind of hyperbolic discourse that usually happens on here with games. But I think I've fully explained myself here. This game fucking sucks, and I grew to hate it more and more the longer I played. My mind is blown by how much of a mess it is, and it's incredible how the only thing it has that could be remotely considered a defining feature is directly responsible for making it as bad as it is. Being set in World War II is the last thing this project needed. The last 2 mainstream World War II games we got, BF5 and Sledgehammer's own World War II, were both total misses that failed to get people excited about the setting. I don't think the market wants another one, and the only reason this is a World War II game is because Treyarch and Infinity Ward have already claimed the other time periods. At this point, if you're going to make a World War II game, you better have a sushi-grade fresh take on it with Grandmaster execution. And I defy anyone to look me in the face and tell me Vanguard is that. This is a year with a new Battlefield and Halo. Now, I'm on record as not having much faith in either of those, but there's no way this will be able to compete outside of COD diehards. It's certainly not all their fault, but based on this game and the Cold War debacle, I don't think Sledgehammer, in their current state, have proven themselves fit to lead develop these games. If you played this miserable little beta, let us know what you thought. If you liked the video, there's a button for that. And if you'd like to see more, there's one for that as well. Until next time, thanks for watching.